Monica Sweeney. I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator with Whatcom Conservation District, and we're excited to have our third in our speaker series for our online learning network for the 5th annual Small Farm Expo. Thank you all for adapting. Further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker for today. This is our talk for today. If you're in the right place, you're on Zoom, you're on Facebook Live. We're here to talk with Laurel Baldwin on how to manage noxious and toxic weeds. I'm working as an employee of the Noxious Weed Control Board of Whatcom County since 1989. So obviously a wealth of knowledge here locally on weed control. And so many of us have pastures that are less than ideal. So I hope to get a lot of great information from Laurel today. She has a horticulture degree from Ohio State University. And through her work here in Whatcom County for the Noxious Weed Control Board, they really focus on sort of 4 primary elements, which one is outreach. So education that she's going to be doing today is something that's very much in the wheelhouse of what the Weed Control Board is looking for. They do mapping and monitoring, as well as special projects in identifying problem areas for noxious weed control. So thank you, Laurel. And if you'd like to share your screen over now on Zoom, and we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, here we go. All right, good morning. Thank you for that introduction, Annika, thanks. Good morning, everybody. We are broadcasting from downtown Bellingham at my house. Actually, I live in Bellingham. And on this beautiful spring sunny morning, and I'm going to talk to you about noxious and toxic weeds on your farm. And noxious, a lot of people confuse that with being toxic, and actually there are lots of noxious weeds that are listed that are not necessarily toxic, but the ones that are noxious and toxic are the ones that I'm going to talk about today. Let's see here. So just give you a little bit of background in addition to what Annika was telling you about. We were activated in 1981. We are set up under a state law, Washington State Law, RCW 1710. And we have a Noxious Weed Control Board consists of 5 voting members from 5 districts. They are in charge of giving us some direction. We meet 4 to 6 times a year, and then we adopt a noxious weed list as well through a public hearing process every January or February. The staff, as Annika mentioned, we monitor noxious weed sites in the county, we assist landowners in recommendations, and we work on weed removal projects and do outreach like we're doing today. And for those of you wondering where we're located, we're in the Public Works building, the Civic Center building, downtown Bellingham. So I wanted to talk about identification, because that's the most important first step when we're dealing with weeds. It's extremely important to know exactly what your target is, because not all weeds are alike, and they all need different types of management, and they all have different strengths and different weaknesses. And I wanted to bring up the example of bull thistle and Canada thistle. The bull thistle is a biennial plant, and it only has a taproot. It reproduces by seed, so that's important to know when you're trying to tackle some management. The Canada thistle, on the other hand, does produce a lot of seed, but a lot of that is not viable, and the Canada thistle mostly reproduces from underground roots or rhizomes that you see here in this picture. The first plant I wanted to talk about this morning, besides the thistle, is the Tansy Ragwort, and that is essentially the plant that got us started back in 1981. It is a pasture plant. It's toxic to livestock. 13 petaled yellow flowers are a really good identifying factor for Tansy Ragwort, and the leaves have real wavy edges, so they kind of look like kale right now. The seeds are the main way of reproducing, and they're spread by wind most of the time, although they can be moved around in hay as well. And the plant contains alkaloids that are toxic to livestock. So The toxins remain in the plant after it's been dried and actually sometimes help that plant become more palatable as well when it's in the hay. It's not to be confused with these two other weeds. We have a common tansy and St. John's wort. St. John's wort is a 5 to 7 petaled plant, and the common tansy is sort of a shoe button, what we call a shoe button flower. Not evident, the rays or the petals are not super evident, so it's more of a button. And in comparison again to the Tansy Ragwort, which if you can remember is almost always going to have 13 petals on the flower, which is a good way to remember the unlucky 13 of Tansy Ragwort. So some control measures for tansy. We do a lot of hand polling. Usually, hopefully we can get to it before it starts to bloom, but at the bolting stage is really good as long as the soils are moist and you can get a good grip on those root system you need to get out of there. You can focus, if you have a lot of tansy, you can just focus on the second year plants because the first year, tansy is biennial, so it comes up and it has leaves and a rosette the first year and it doesn't do anything that first year. And then the second year is when it sends up stems and flowers. So you want to try and get those second year plants when they're before they're flowering. If you do happen upon them when they're flowering, you can cut the flower heads off and bag those and pull the rest of the plant up and leave it on some impervious surface to dry out in the summer sun. That's a good thing to do. But if you are pulling the plants, don't leave them blooming on the ground because they will go to seed by themselves even while they're in flower or even close to flower. They will go ahead and seed out. We don't generally recommend mowing for tansy because it seems to strengthen the root system and it doesn't control the plants. So mowing is generally not recommended. In terms of herbicides, we've got 2,4-D, which goes by many, many brand names. There are 2,4-D and triclopyr combinations. The most well-known one is Crossbow. There are 2,4-D and dicamba combinations that also work. Weedmaster is an example of a brand name. The spring right now or fall is the best timing that you're going to get with any of those products. And I can't emphasize enough about following label rates. Read and follow the label. Spray to wet only. So the problem with Tansy Ragwort is that you see here is that this plant turns into these little puffballs just like dandelions. And this plant is really very prolific at producing seed. It can produce, one plant can produce 140,000 little new plants. So preventing even one plant from blooming and setting seed on your property is a really good thing to do. It can knock you back to square one and beyond if you are controlling it and you miss a year or you miss a few plants. So it's really important to keep up with it. Okay, next one up is Scotch Broom. Produces about 12,000 seeds per plant per year. It's interesting that the seeds can be flung about 10 to 15 feet by the plant itself in the summertime. If you've walked into a patch of Scotch Broom in the summertime, you can hear the seed pods popping. They're flinging the seeds far away from the mother plant. And those seeds can lie dormant in the soil for 5 to 30 years. The seeds of the plant and other plant parts, but mostly the seeds, can be toxic to animals and humans, so you want to be careful of that. Generally not something that you are going to have in hay if you're using property for hay as a hay crop. But if you've got problems with this plant in other parts of your property, you want to be aware that the seeds can be a problem. Scotch Broom pollen is generally not likely a source of allergies, although I know a lot of people complain about it when it's blooming. There's also a lot of grasses that will be blooming and tillering at the same time that Scotch Broom blooms, but it's bright yellow and it smells, and so a lot of people blame that for their allergies. Not saying that it won't be a problem for allergies, but sometimes it's not likely because the pollen grains are so huge. They don't move well on wind currents. So unless you're standing in the middle of a Scotch Broom, you're generally not going to get allergies from the pollen. You might get allergies or a response from the smell, which isn't all that great. For management options, we got weed wrenches, and those are really great. That was an invention that came about just to minimize soil disturbance, and especially for Scotch Broom, because the seeds, all those seeds can lie dormant in that soil. You want to try and not disturb the soil a lot, and the weed wrench allows you to do that. By pulling the plants out, you don't really have to disturb the soil much. We also have done cut stem and girdling on Scotch Broom plants. It's good for places where erosion is a concern. Just taking a linoleum knife is what we used. We cut the plants off about a foot or so above the ground and then girdled or peeled all the bark off the plant. You see in the lower picture there on the left, that is a plant in 2018 and the exact same stump 6 months later, and it did not survive any of that. We were concerned about seeds coming up around that too. But seems like they were chased out by the grasses. Okay. I'm going to X out this box. I don't know why I'm having these problems. Anyway, herbicide, triclopyr. That works in a cut stump treatment, goes under different brand names, and that's the active ingredient I'm listing there. Glyphosate is another active ingredient, comes under many, many brand names too. You can try a foliar spray in the springtime right about now at a 1.5 to 2% solution, which is about 1.9 to 2.6 ounces of concentrate glyphosate per gallon of water. And again, to follow the label rates, whatever it is your label is telling you to do is something to follow, and spray wet only. Poison hemlock. This is another one that's showing up quite a bit now. It showed up earlier as one of the first things to green up in the county, and it comes in a bright green, sort of carrot top looking thing. It is in the carrot parsley family, but it's a very poisonous member of that family. It is also toxic when it gets into hay, so that's also something you want to keep out of your hay fields. It's native to Europe, and it has these white lacy flowers. All parts of the plant are poisonous to animals and humans. This is the plant that killed Socrates, and it closely resembles a lot of other members of the carrot and parsley family, so it's really important to keep an eye on that family in particular because they can look an awful lot alike. The one thing that distinguishes it from other members of that family is the stem. If you look at the stem, it's smooth, it's hairless, and it's got purple blotches on it. In terms of management, we do kind of the same for Tansy Ragwort. For the hand pulling, you're working at the bolting stage or when the soil is wet. You can focus on the second year plants again, like when you do with Tansy Ragwort. You can clip the flower heads at blooming and bag those up and then leave the rest out to dry on a tarp or something. But be sure to wear gloves and long sleeves for protection. It's a plant that you really have to ingest in order to suffer any symptoms, but some people report rashes and other kind of responses to the smell of the plant, which sort of smells like old dirty socks. Not very pleasant. Some people get kind of woozy or nauseated from just smelling the plant. So just be aware of that. And at least wear gloves and long sleeves for protection. Again, because it's a biennial weed, if you remember, the first year plant sends up the foliage and then the second year sends up that flowering stem. We're not really recommending that mowing is going to be any kind of useful control for it. It tends to embolden or build up the stem, and it just keeps shooting foliage up after that. For herbicides, 2,4-D and a foliar spray in early spring right now. Well, maybe a little bit earlier. We're starting to move out that window. Glyphosate, again, under many brand names, 1 to 2% as a foliar spray before the stem lengthening starts, and that's what we call bolting. And they're just about starting to bolt in certain parts of the county right now. There's also a new hollow stem injection that can be done that you can inject 5 milliliters of a 5% solution. And a 5% solution would be 6.4 ounces per gallon of water. You definitely want to follow the label rates again. I can't emphasize that enough. And I'm going to, at the end of the presentation, I'm going to show a website if you're not really sure about what herbicide that you want to purchase. If you're going to go that route, it's really great if you can research the label a little bit before you go and purchase it. This plant is wild gerbil, and I put this in here because it's starting to show up quite a bit in the county, particularly east of the guide and north of Pole Road. We're having a lot of gerbil sites show up out there up to the border with Canada. It outcompetes foragers and pastures, but it's not toxic to livestock. It just looks an awful lot like poison hemlock. They're really hard to tell apart. And it also outcompetes native plants in our natural areas as well. So it's not sticking to just the farm, it's moving into other areas. It tolerates shade and all kinds of different conditions. It's really difficult to eradicate once established. It pretty much is going to take some herbicide treatment. And I wanted to show you a picture here of the two plants side by side. I actually found them both side by side. If you're looking at these and you're thinking, I wonder which one is hemlock and which one is chervil. So the one on the left is poison hemlock and the other one is wild chervil. And the way that you look at them when they're really small like this, because they bloom at different times, so you're not going to be able to tell by the flower necessarily until it's blooming. So looking at poison hemlock, you want to look really close, even as a young plant. If you peel back the foliage and look at the stems there, and do this with gloves, you can see that the stems are nice and smooth, and they have purple splotches, just like I mentioned before in the previous slide. Wild chervil is not going to have purple splotches, and the stem is actually a little bit ridged, and as it matures, the stem also gets kind of fuzzy. So it's very, very different from poison hemlock. They're both a problem, but one's poisonous and one is not. And I'm about to start getting phone calls for Buttercup. It hasn't really started to become a big problem yet. Oops, let me go back. But it will be. It'll start blooming here pretty soon. Liming can encourage grass and discourage buttercup. So you want to keep your pastures healthy with the grasses that you have in order to discourage that plant. It also really likes wet areas, so if there's anything you can do to improve the drainage, it's helpful to minimize the buttercup. And another key thing, if it's in your pasture, make sure that you try to avoid overgrazing, because the animals, livestock, will eat down everything that competes with the buttercup and give it an open area to move. And then also, it has some toxins in it. So usually you're getting symptoms of sort of a colicky response in your livestock if they're eating a lot of buttercup. And they can actually, some animals can develop a pica or a taste for buttercup. So you want to be careful of that too. For mechanical, you can do hand pulling. You want to make sure you get all the roots. Sometimes it's better to pull from November to April when the soils are wetter, so you can get all those root segments out. We don't generally recommend mowing. It doesn't seem to do anything to the plants. And actually, if you're mowing during flowering, you can spread the seeds around, so it might exacerbate the problem a little bit. As far as chemical treatments, there's MCPA, which is selective. It's a broadleaf herbicide, and you can use that on a broadcast, and it won't harm your grasses. And you can use glyphosate, but you want to spot spray that because it will hurt grasses, so you want to be very careful with that application. And of course, since both of those come under different brand names, again, you want to follow the label rates. And I wanted to point out also that buttercup is not toxic when it's dried in hay. It's only toxic when it's fresh in the field and your animals are grazing it. So I want to point out our website. You can see the header there at the top. This is where you get the noxious weed fact sheets we've developed. I actually don't have a count right now, but over 30 species of different weeds where we have management documents for those individual weeds, and you can go to our website and have a look at those. If you are, let's see here. This is what the for instance, the blackberry document looks like. We have two different documents. We have something that is going to tell you about the plant and identify it for you and tell you about some of the lookalikes and that kind of thing. And then on the other document, you'll see the management document, you'll see the control options for that particular plant, in this case, Himalayan blackberry. I also wanted to point out that, as I mentioned before, we have a 5-member voting board. We meet about 4 to 6 times a year. We have a vacancy on the board, and I would love to have someone apply and become a member of the board. It's not a big time commitment. I'd love to have some farmers join us in particular, and they must reside within the district of District 3, which is being obliterated by my annoying box on the screen in front of me right now. But it runs through Ferndale and east of Ferndale through Deming. So if you're located in that area or you want to clarify your interest in being on the board, I would be happy to answer questions for you and see if you fit into our district. And they're not paid members, but we do reimburse mileage to meetings. Those meetings that are 4 to 6 times a year. So if you have plans, you want to send me pictures of them, the best way is to do email for me right now. I'm checking my office phone, but not as often. I don't have access to it as often as my email. So you can copy down my email there. Whatcom County website header is the link that you see there. It's a little different than the fact sheet link. But if you are having a hard time accessing the weed board site, just go to the Whatcom County government site and do a search on Noxious, and you will find us, to be guaranteed. Washington State Noxious Weed Board has a great website if you want more information. They also have on their website this great booklet called Protect Your Horses and Livestock from Toxic Plants. It's a relatively new publication. We're a little low on the hard copies, but I could still send some out. But really, everything you need to see is on the website there, and they have it online in a PDF format. And then, as I mentioned before, the herbicide label database. This is www.cdms.net. You can get labels there for herbicides, and you can get the safety data sheets, which is what the SDS stands for, so you can read up about that. I really encourage you to do that if you're considering using an herbicide. The more research, the better, to just be informed and know what you're putting down and know that your target is the right target for that particular strategy. And that's all I have for you. And I suppose we'll take some chat questions.
Yes. Thank you so much, Laurel. Sorry about the technical difficulties there.
Yeah, I am sorry too. I'm really sorry.
Gosh, no, yeah. We will get your slides from you and can publish those without the box on there, and that won't be a problem at all. And thank you to the viewers for bearing with us. So now I'd love to field any questions or clarifications that you would like from Laurel. And again, in the chat box, you should see we added the link directly to those weed fact sheets. I know we had Scotch Broom come up along our fence line this year, and I want to buy a weed wrench now that you mentioned that, Laurel.
Oh, yeah.
Where can I get a weed wrench?
Actually, they're not made anymore. The company folded, but there's a new company that there's a couple different tools. One's called the Uprooter, and the Uprooter was made by an employee, a former employee of the weed wrench company, so it's close to the weed wrench as you can get. They have a couple different sizes, I think, and it's a white tool instead of orange. There's also a company up in Canada in Richmond that makes something called the Extractigator. And we have all of these on loan. I think our loan program is on hold, at least until May, until we figure out how to do this and make sure that things are okay for us to loan these tools out. But we do have a fleet of 8 tools in the office, and they are for loan for free, just like a library book.
Great. And now that you mentioned this working remotely and site visits, so if folks think that they might have a problem plant and they email it to you, but it's hard for you to identify, have you been able to do virtual site visits, or how is that looking for you?
At this point, we haven't really been encountering that dilemma yet, but I'm sure that there would be a way for us to still abide by the social distancing and visit a piece of property if somebody tagged a plant and we were to go there, and then I could email them or have a phone conversation with them in terms of what I identified and what might be best for their situation. I'd be happy to do that.
Great. Yeah, because now is definitely the time when some of those things are starting to pop up and want to deal with it sooner than later.
Yeah.
Let me check the chat box here. Any questions? Send them in now. It was a great presentation with some really nice comparison slides. I appreciated that.
Yeah,
Especially
there's a lot of
Tansy
lookalikes out
Ragwort.
there.
Yeah, there's so many lookalikes for all of these pieces. And it was good to know that Buttercup, when dried into hay, is non-toxic. So that is also
Yeah,
helpful.
it loses its toxins.
Then let's see. Any other questions from the audience? And let's check the Facebook Live as well. Nothing coming in right now. And you can always email Laurel or us at the Conservation District, smallfarmexpo@whatcomcd.org if you have any questions or concerns about noxious weeds, and we can connect you with the resources that we have available. That pamphlet that Laurel has up on the screen, Protect Your Horses and Livestock from Toxic Plants. We have a great number of those at the district office as well, that we'd love to be able to share. They could be mailed to you if you were to send your address. And with no other questions coming in, is there any last comments, Laurel, you'd like to make for our audience today?
I can't think of any off the top of my head. I just, please, if you need some help, don't be afraid to reach out. We're here to help you out and help you make some decisions if you find plants that are perplexing or you're worrying about your animals. I do inspections for folks before they get livestock also to make sure that they don't have poisonous plants on their property, and that's an option too.
Oh, that's a great resource. So if folks are checking out a property or they've just purchased and wanna, before they get livestock, have you do an assessment, that is a great resource. Well, thank you so much, Laurel. And again, tune in for the next couple days. We have 2 more talks coming up tomorrow on pastures, and then on Wednesday for irrigation. Tune back in here, 10 a.m. on Facebook Live, and the link will be posted on our Small Farm Expo page on the Whatcom Conservation District website 24 hours in advance. So check that out. And we hope to see you at our next presentation on the Online Learning Network, Small Farm Expo. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Laurel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you so much, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow.